Us now to talk about all of this on the legal perspective, too, is former acting U.S. Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Matt, great to have you here. First off, I have to get you to respond a little bit what Rudy and I were talking about just now. The fact that the warrant was signed on the Friday, they make it sound like it was imminent. They had no other way, but they had to hurry up and execute it. And yet they wait until a Monday to execute it. And even in the judge and the magistrate, they give it 19 days to execute it. It didn't seem like that much of a rush. Which one is it?
Good morning, and I'm glad to be with you. And I think that's a very important point. You know, the Department of Justice policy is to make sure they use the least invasive means possible to gather the evidence under the circumstances. And under these circumstances, it seems to me that they didn't even consider that policy, because there were, not only could you have issued a subpoena for this, but you could have continued to negotiate in good faith. You know, it did not sound to me as if Donald Trump had any desire to keep documents. In fact, his public statements support that he had no desire to keep any documents he wasn't entitled to keep. And at the same time, you know, if he wanted to keep these documents, or if he was able to possess them, you know, he believes that they're unclassified. And so I just think this case seems to me to be, to the point of others, a way to change the narrative, a way to change the public discussion away from things like inflation and gas prices and other kitchen table issues, and move it to Donald Trump. Because the left, remember, they love running against Donald Trump and saying Donald Trump's name. And this seems to be a way to bring him back into the political discussion.
How much of it is also a fishing expedition? By the way, I have a copy of the warrant here, too, and I was reading it, and it's interesting because it is so broad. It's so sweeping, Matt. You've seen a lot of warrants, of course, as the acting attorney general. Is that typical? And also, how much does that say is, okay, it's a fishing expedition, that even if they don't stumble upon this, what they're saying they're looking for, it could open the door when they find something else and try to proceed and hope to find something?
You're right, and I did see a lot of warrants, especially when I was the United States attorney in the Bush administration in Des Moines, Iowa. But you know, search warrants of this type, while they allow a broad discretion on the agents, if we're talking about classified or top secret information that is alleged to have been at Mar-a-Lago, you could do a much more laser-focused search with much more tailored to specifically what you know is there. In this case, they went right to the president's office and were able to spend hours, not only as an office, but as a private residence and in his in storage room. And so you're right, they could have seen a tremendous amount of things. Now, while they can't use the documents for a different prosecution outside the scope of the search warrant you just held up, what they can do is they can see it, they have eyes, and they can learn that knowledge and then base a case and go a different direction if they believe they saw evidence of some other thing. So it feels like a fishing expedition, because it was.
Now, what about, though, if it turns out that indeed these documents were unclassified? They were already declassified by the president, and we've been hearing a lot of things in the last 24 hours that the president and the vice president sort of have the authority to almost declassify at any time while they're in office. So say he declassified it, and the evidence that was in this affidavit that we still have yet to see, which I think is going to be really the heart of it all, as you know, that justify the warrant. Does that make the warrant illegitimate if it turns out there wasn't anything that was classified sitting out there, that it had already been declassified?
Well, and I'm sure that's what the FBI is worried about, because this case ultimately is going to come down to knowledge. If they're going to charge Donald Trump with crimes, those crimes require a mens rea, which is he knew he was mishandling classified information, or that he knew he possessed classified information. And remember, in the two cases, either he believes that he declassified these documents so they're no longer classified, or he has a fairly good defense that, the General Services Administration hacked my office. And I don't have any idea what is in these boxes. And if you remember, all reports are that he had his lawyers and others going through this and interacting with the National Archives and others about these documents. I just, again, I continue to believe that there was a easier and better way to settle this dispute, if it even was a dispute, and that going in with a search warrant with this number of FBI agents was an intentional act to, have this firestorm that has erupted, and we're talking about it almost a week later now, to have exactly this outcome, so that the narrative, the national narrative heading into the 2022 election would be different from what was hurting Democrats and Joe Biden.
Well, and exactly to that point, Matt, as you know, the National Archives documents, I've covered the White House. I was based in Washington, senior correspondent for many, many years there in Washington. And I can think of so many conversations that happened with every single president after they left office where there was a dialogue. Okay, what papers do you have? What do you have? Let's discuss it. It was always a conversation. I don't think there was ever a time where a president didn't take something that the National Archives would want some piece of. And we know that there's tons, apparently, that President Obama still has. So this is really the exception to the rule that they go in to the raid to his home. How unusual is this? And what could happen to President Trump if they decide to make an example, a rare example out of this?
Well, this is certainly unprecedented. No president has ever had a search warrant executed on his papers and documents that he, moved from the White House to his permanent residence after he served. So we really don't have, anything to compare this to. But I think this is just such an extraordinary step. I continue to hope that this is resolved, professionally, the way it should have been. To your point, Obama still has documents that are disputed with the federal government and under the Presidential Records Act, and so I continue to just not understand how this can happen to Donald Trump and nobody else. George Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, none of them had. And then you take the next tier of folks that have been accused of mishandling classified information, whether it's General David Petraeus, whether it's Hillary Clinton, and others, Sandy Berger, and no one had a search warrant executed on their premises. So this just seems to me that the Attorney General and the Department of Justice can stand on their platitudes, but at the end of the day, the priorities of the Department of Justice are what the Attorney General ultimately controls, and one of his priorities is clearly to target and prosecute Donald Trump. And it's a very sad day in the United States of America because of these people that are solely focused on trying to bring down Donald Trump.
Matt Whitaker, thank you very much for your very, very important perspective on all this. Great to have you here, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody